The first thing I saw when I opened the cabin door was a woman's suitcase sitting on my bed. The second thing I saw was a stranger standing beside it, folding clothes into the dresser as if she had been living there for weeks. For a few seconds, I couldn't breathe. I had driven nearly 5 hours from Chicago to a quiet lakeside cabin in northern Michigan, believing I was finally getting the one thing I desperately needed, a weekend away from everything that had gone wrong in my life. Instead, I had walked straight into someone else's mystery, and somehow, by Sunday evening, that stranger would teach me that sometimes the most unexpected people arrive in our lives, carrying exactly the lesson our hearts have been begging to learn. But before we get into the story, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the possibility that one small act can change a person's entire life, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to the channel. You never know when a story like this might remind someone that they are not alone. My name is Nathan, and that year had been one long exercise in pretending I was okay. I was 38, divorced, exhausted, and quietly ashamed of how little I had left to show for the life I once thought I understood. My marriage to Rachel had ended after years of drifting apart, and although neither of us had been cruel, the silence between us had become heavier than any argument. I had moved into a small apartment, buried myself in work, and stopped answering friends who kept asking if I was doing all right. Then, at a charity auction held by a local children's hospital, I impulsively bid on a weekend getaway at a private cabin overlooking Lake Charlevoix. I had gone there intending to support the charity and distract myself from my own problems. Somehow, I won. The prize included 2 nights at a beautiful wooden cabin, complete with a fireplace, a lake view, and enough peace to make a broken man believe he could start over. I arrived Friday afternoon beneath a gray Michigan sky, carrying one duffel bag and a ridiculous amount of hope. The cabin was even more beautiful than the photographs had promised. Tall pine trees surrounded it. The lake stretched beyond the windows like silver glass, and inside there was a stone fireplace, warm wooden walls, and the faint scent of cedar. I unlocked the front door, stepped inside, and called out a cheerful hello before realizing I wasn't alone. A woman stood in the bedroom doorway, frozen with a sweater in her hands. She looked about 35, with tired blue eyes and blonde hair pulled into a loose bun. Beside her were 2 suitcases, a medical bag, and a small stuffed rabbit. She looked at me with the same confusion I felt. Her name was Claire. My first instinct was anger. I thought the charity had made some terrible booking mistake. Or perhaps Claire was trespassing. But then, I noticed something strange. Her hands were trembling. She wasn't acting like someone caught doing something wrong. She looked terrified. We checked the reservation emails, the printed confirmation, even the cabin address. Everything matched. My name was on my reservation, but Claire had paperwork showing the exact same cabin for the exact same weekend. The owner, a man named Samuel, was horrified when he finally answered his phone. He explained that a booking system error had duplicated the reservation. The nearest available hotel was almost an hour away, and because a storm was moving across the lake, driving back that evening wasn't ideal. I expected Claire to pack immediately and leave. Instead, she quietly said she would sleep in her car if she had to. Something about that sentence stopped me. I looked at the medical bag beside her suitcase, and finally noticed a hospital bracelet hanging from its zipper. Claire explained that she had come to Michigan because her younger brother, Michael, was receiving treatment at the children's hospital connected to the charity that had hosted the auction. She had been sleeping in hospital waiting rooms for nearly 2 weeks, while doctors tried to stabilize him after a sudden illness. The cabin wasn't a vacation for her. It was the only place she had been given to rest after a hospital social worker arranged a discounted stay. She had chosen the weekend because Michael had finally fallen asleep peacefully, and she had promised herself she would spend 48 hours somewhere that didn't smell like disinfectant and fear. Suddenly, my anger felt embarrassingly small. I told Claire she could stay. There were 2 bedrooms, and I had no reason to turn a mistake into another hardship for someone already carrying more than she could bear. That first evening, we kept our distance. I made coffee. She sat near the window. Rain tapped against the glass while the fireplace crackled between us. But slowly, the silence became less uncomfortable. She told me about Michael, about their childhood in Ohio, about how he used to protect her from thunderstorms by sitting beside her bed and telling ridiculous stories until she stopped being afraid. I told her about my divorce, though I left out some of the details because they still hurt too much to say aloud. Saturday morning, something changed. Claire found me outside, trying to fix a loose board on the porch, and we ended up laughing when I nearly dropped a hammer through the railing. We walked along the lake beneath a clearing sky, drank coffee at a tiny cafe in town, and talked about the strange ways life could break apart without asking permission. Claire admitted she was afraid to return to the hospital because she didn't know what she would find. I admitted I was afraid to return home because my apartment was so quiet that every room reminded me of Rachel. For the first time in months, I realized I wasn't the only person carrying fear. That evening, Claire received a phone call. Her face changed immediately. Michael had taken a turn for the worse. She packed her bag with shaking hands, and I drove her through the rain toward the hospital. We sat in the parking lot for a moment before she went inside, and I watched her disappear beneath the bright hospital entrance. I spent the night in the car, unsure why I stayed. Maybe because I knew what it felt like to have someone walk away when you needed them most. Maybe because, for once, I didn't want to be the person who left. Michael survived the night. The doctors stabilized him, and by Sunday morning, Claire came back to the cabin crying, not from grief, but from relief. We stood on the porch overlooking the lake, both of us exhausted. She thanked me for giving her a place to breathe when she thought she had nowhere left to go. I told her she had given me something too. She had reminded me that my life wasn't over simply because one chapter had ended. Months later, Michael began recovering. Claire returned to Ohio, and eventually started working with families who had children receiving long-term hospital care. I went back to Chicago, and finally began rebuilding my life instead of merely surviving it. We stayed friends. Not because of romance, not because either of us needed rescuing, but because two strangers had accidentally shared a cabin and discovered that kindness can become a bridge between two hurting hearts. Sometimes I think about that first moment when I opened the cabin door and saw Claire unpacking her bags. I remember the anger rising in me, the confusion, the feeling that someone had stolen the one peaceful weekend I had won. But I understand now that I hadn't lost my getaway. I had found it. It simply wasn't the getaway I expected. I went there hoping to escape my life, and instead, I found a reason to return to it. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like the video. Share it with someone who may need a reminder that kindness still matters, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps these stories reach people who might be quietly struggling behind a smile. And before you go, I want to ask you something special. Comment "Kindness finds a way" if you believe that sometimes the stranger we meet by accident becomes the person who helps us find our way back to hope. Because sometimes, the greatest gifts in life don't arrive wrapped in ribbons. Sometimes they arrive during a storm, carrying a suitcase, standing in the wrong bedroom, and reminding us that even when life doesn't go according to plan, God may still be writing something beautiful.